Hey guys, Into the End here, back with another video, this time an update to the Mind Link deck that I posted a video for a few days ago. This deck is pretty fun. I've done a lot more testing over the last few days with the help of Fast Hippie, who gave me a lot of good ideas, and also Chrysalio, another YouTube content provider, which also gave me some ideas. So let's do a quick recap of what happened. We started off with this list from the Reddit user Generic Aviary, and this was a list that I really liked because it has basically half of the deck is just an Elysian mid-range aggro deck, which is quite effective even if you don't draw the Mind Link. It can win on its own without the Mind Link combo. We recorded about 5 or 6 games on camera. I think we went 1-5, which is not a very good record. We learned a lot from those games. And I did a bunch more games over the last few days. And let me give you a summary of what I've learned. First of all, this deck is too slow. The curve is too high, and a lot of the 1 and 2 drops that you play and 3 drops that you play don't do anything to impact the board. So most often you'll find yourself being dominated on board by turn 5 or 6. And because this deck doesn't have any way to catch up or reverse or sweep the board, once you've fallen behind, you can no longer catch up. So you don't have things like, harsh rule, and you also don't have any haymakers that are very expensive, but once you play, you turn the situation around. You don't have powerful 6 drops like Heart of the Vault, Predatory Cranosaur, Black Sky Harbinger. So once you're falling behind, you really do fall very far behind. Cards like Crystallize doesn't serve the same function, because if you are already behind on board, playing Crystallize will only buy you 1 more turn before you die. It's usually not enough to kill off enough of your opponent's units, and because it's quite expensive to play, it's 5 power to play, you're not going to be able to play this and then play a bunch of other spells to catch up on a board state where you have nothing. So, and let's talk about some of the individual cards that I have problems with. You have a lot of cards in your deck that doesn't impact the board state, like Backlash, Rain of Frogs, Zen and Obelisk. The Mind Link itself does absolutely nothing when you play it. Wisdom of the Elder doesn't impact the board state either. So you have far too many cards that take up a lot of power and turns to play, and it doesn't help you secure a stronger board state. So cards like cards like Scouting Party that you normally think is pretty good at expanding your board state, when you've fallen so far behind, even when you play cards like this, very often you just end up chumping with the 1/1s to survive. And even if you don't need to block with this, you can't usually attack with the Yeti Spies because you're using cards like Polymorph and Rain of Frogs, which give your opponent a lot of random 1/1 frogs sitting around. So if you cast Scouting Party, most likely you're not going to be able to attack him because he'll have just as many random frogs sitting around. Cards like Shimmerpack theoretically should be able to reverse a losing board state, but that is only true if you have more units than your opponent. In the case of this deck, it is very often the case that your opponent has more units than you, so this isn't strong enough. In fact, a lot of games that I play, I'm so busy chump blocking to survive that when I do manage to get to 8 power, I'll have no units in play, and my opponent will have 3 or 4 giant 6/6s in play, which makes this card really bad. Yeah, so a lot of cards in this deck are very conditional. You need to have a lot of units in play for this to be good. You need to be able to attack for this to be good. You need a lot of units in play for this to pump. You need to have a lot of units in play for this to be effective so you can finish the game by making an Alpha Strike. So yeah, and another problem I have with this deck is actually just the interaction with Mind Link. The best card to play after Mind Link is Unstable Form, and that interaction has some serious problems. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So say on turn 3 you play Mind Link. That uses up your whole turn. It uses up 3 of your power. Let's say on turn 4 your opponent plays an Impending Doom, costs him 4 power. On your 4th turn you play unstable form on it, turning that impending doom into a random 5-power unit. Yes, there are some games where it turns into a worse unit, but there's just as many games where it would turn into a better unit, or one that's better in any given in that specific situation, or equally as good. And then you have a problem. You've spent 3 power and did nothing with it. You spent another power on turn 4, and you drew a copy of that 5-drop. And then because you can't play that unit because it costs 5 and it's turn 4, you only have 3 power left after you spend 1 on unstable form. You cannot play this unit into your following turn, which takes up your entire turn, 5. So your opponent played a 4 power, well, effectively your opponent played a 5 power unit for 4 power, getting a discount. You spent 9 power to play the same unit that your opponent put in play for 4. That's 9 power to do what he did with 4. You've lost 5 power in this exchange, and every single time you play unstable form on an opponent's unit with Mindlink, that happens. So as you can see, on a deck like this that falls behind on board, it is only going to fall further and further behind on board on Temple because of this interaction. Every cast of unstable form onto opponent's unit is a massive Temple loss for you. So, and I think this is a problem that Direwolf Digital is going to have to find a way to fix, because if they can't fix this problem with this interaction, if they don't print new cards that transform things that are better than unstable form and polymorph, then I think Mindlink is going to be unplayable. So with all that said, let's take a look at the directions we've taken the deck. Now, the version that I came up with after a bunch of testing is this one. I added 4 copies of Initiates of the Sands because I think this deck needs the acceleration and ramp. Because it's so slow, because it's got such poor tempo, you want to have access to as much power as possible, as quickly as possible. And also having a random 1/1 unit in play when you have Shimmerpack is also a good thing. Permafrost is a must to have because this deck is far too slow. If you don't have any early game interaction, if you have to wait until turn 3 to play a Polymorph, or even turn 4 because you want to play Mindlink on turn 3, then it's far too slow. I added a couple copies of Sand Viper just to help with the early game defensiveness of the deck, and Sand Viper isn't the best choice. I just couldn't think of anything better. This card is totally cuttable. If you have any better ideas for the 2-drop slot or even 1-drop, please leave it in the comments below and I'll make this change. I kept Marisen's Disciples because like I said in the other video, I really like the idea that this card leaves behind 2 bodies, which is very good for Shimmerpack. And one of the bodies is a 1/1 Deadly Scorpion, which blocks any unit, which I like a lot. So this card is here to stay. The one card that is different is I added Yetipult. I found this card to be incredibly effective against fast aggressive decks like Stonescar and Skycrag, but it's also really good at incidentally getting rid of all the frogs you've given your opponent with Polymorph and Rain of Frogs. And those little 1/1s do eventually do a lot of damage over time. So being able to sweep his board of all the 1/1s you gave him for free is very good. Cirso is, I think, a very obvious inclusion to the deck. This card is one of the best, most powerful 5-mana units you can have in the game. Nothing brawls with it, and if they do block it, you get to make 2/2 pigs, which you can then draw off of Mindlink. So there's a natural synergy between Mindlink and Cirso. Although that never really happens because nobody ever blocks Cirso, so they just wait until they can remove it with a removal spell. Magus of the Mist has some very good interactions with Permafrost. With Unstable Form. For those of you who don't know about this interaction, when Magus of the Mist dies, the 6/6 dragon that it comes with dies as well. But if you unstable form the Magus into something else, the dragon stays. So what you end up with is an upgrade to this random 3/3 into most likely a much better 6-power unit. Plus you get to keep the 6/6 flying dragon. So that's a very powerful turn 6 play. You get one 6/6 flyer, which is very good, and usually you get another very good unit as well out of it. And then the Shimmerpack was from the original list. So, and I found this deck to be much more effective. I have a much stronger game against early game decks, and I have a much stronger game against basically Stone Scar aggro, Skycrag aggro, and I have a pretty good matchup against mid-range decks because of the inclusion of cards like Magus of the Mist comboing with Unstable Form, and also because of Cirso. All right. And of course, the additional removal spell helps a lot. So this is my version, and I did pretty well with this version. Ever since I started playing this, I was able to very quickly climb from Gold 3 into Gold 2, which we weren't able to do with the original list. Now, Chrysalio is a YouTube content provider. He has a channel that's, I believe, it's all Russian, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Russian. And he actually has a lot of really fun, spicy, gimmicky, janky decks on his YouTube channel. His version of the deck is even spicier than mine. He plays with 4 copies of Crown of Possibilities. His deck is actually very similar to mine. The only difference is really just the Crown of Possibilities in place of my 2 Yetipults and the 2 Sand Vipers. Crown of Possibility has a very interesting interaction with Mindlink when you play Shimmerpack onto your opponent's units. For every unit that you transform from your opponent's side, you will draw an additional copy of Shimmerpack, and it's going to come with a new skill. So if you are able to ever get to 8 power plus these 2 cards in play, you're going to start drawing some pretty absurd Shimmerpack tokens, or just Shimmerpacks. And the reason I tried this version a few times, and the reason I didn't choose to go with Crown of Possibilities is because I found that this deck already has too many cards that doesn't impact the board state, and now you're adding 4 more that does nothing on its own. With both Mindlink and Crown, you need to play it, and then you need to wait for something else to happen. And I find that with Crown of Possibilities, a lot of the units that you draw in this deck don't really benefit from the extra skill. There's only a very small number of skills that you would want onto your random 1/1s and 0/2s and 1/1s and 2/1s. You know, having a Talir's Favored with Charge isn't going to help you. Having a Temple Scribe with double damage isn't going to be any good. Having Initiates of the Sands with Overwhelm is not useful. So a lot of the things you can get from Crown is not good. It's pretty much really only good when you draw one of your big units. But the thing about your big units is that they're very good on their own without the special ability. So is it worth adding an additional ability, you know, giving Sandstorm Titan flying, for example? Is that worth the risk of drawing Crown of Possibility and having it be a dead card because you top decked it? You know, both Mindlink, Crown, Rain of Frogs, Unstable Form, all of these cards are very bad if you top deck it. And for me, in order to make a consistent deck, I would like to reduce the amount of variance by getting rid of conditional cards like this. And this is the reason why I didn't use this deck. But for those of you guys who are interested in this deck, you can definitely check out Chrysalio's channel, where he recorded some games using this deck here, and he did do some pretty fun, absurd stuff with it. But he's also speaking in Russian, so I don't really know what he's saying. But still, fun games. Now that's so we started with generic Aviary's list. We branched off into my version and Chrysalio's version, and with the input from Fast Hippie here, I actually came up with another quite spicy version of this deck, which I'm not ready to show you. I'm not ready to record gameplay with it, but I can show you the concept behind the deck. Basically, what Fast Hippie said was there's actually stronger and better transform cards in black and red, because Feeding Time is a superior version of Polymorph, and you also draw 2/2 pigs instead of 1/1 frogs, which I think is much better. And also, Statutory Maiden makes additional cudgels if you have Mindlink in play, which I think is also very powerful. There's a lot going on in this deck. This is essentially a Felon control deck that splashes just a tiny bit of red for the Maiden. But there's some very, very good things going on. The first problem with our Mind Link deck was that there's no way to catch up once you've fallen behind on board. But with these colors, between Sandstorm and Withering Witch, it gives you a comeback mechanism. No matter how bad the game state is, if you have these two cards in hand, you can always wipe the board and come back. That is same is true with Withering Witch and Black Sky Harbinger. Very powerful interactions. The Bloodcaster gives you a much needed source of card advantage in the late game, and also offers you a very powerful early game blocker that impacts the board. And all the random 1/1s and random 2/2 pigs that you make off of Mind Link, they're normally very useless in the previous deck, in the Elysian deck, until you draw the Shimmerpack. In this deck, however, they are really useful because you can start putting +2/+2 weapons onto them. So your 2/2 pig can be a 4/4 or a 6/6 in no time, turning it into a sizable threat. Also, your random 1/1s and 2/2 sitting around will eventually get buffed by the Champion of Cunning, making them also must-answer threats. In a couple of turns, they become 4/2s or 6/2s, and all of a sudden your opponent's going to have to trade his Sandstorm Titans and his Heart of the Vault for these crappy 2/2 pigs. So that is a very powerful interaction and a good way to take advantage of all the random 1/1s and 2/2s that you have that are otherwise useless. So the Maiden and the Champion of Cunning make very good use of those Mind Link tokens that you make. And you have some very powerful catch-up mechanism in the Withering Witch, Black Sky Harbinger, and Lightning Storm. And you also have a Haymaker against all kinds of late-game control decks with Azindo's Gift, allowing you to pretty much guarantee that you can outgrind them in the late game. And early game-wise, by having 4 Lightning Storm into your deck, by getting rid of all the time units like Initiates of the Sand and Amber Acolyte and Temple Scribes, you're now able to play 4 copies of Lightning Storm, which is very, very good against aggressive decks. So giving you a pretty powerful early game, a decently powerful mid game, and a very powerful late game as well. So this deck looks quite promising. I've only played half a dozen games with it. I did outright with this deck, but it's still too early to make conclusions, and I do need to still fine-tune the number of copies of certain cards in it. So I'm not ready to make a deck tech or a gameplay video for that yet. That's going to come next week. So with that said, we should end this video. It's getting a little long. I'm going to end the video and record the gameplay videos separately. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see, give me a like or thumbs up, or give me a subscribe. If you want to see more content from me, I will be uploading videos like this one regularly. Once again, if you're new to the channel, I do spend the first 2 weeks of the month doing gimmicky, janky, fun brews like this to try to make them competitive. And then on the second half of the month, I will try and climb into top ranks in Master, and I typically finish top 70, 50 or so by the end of the month. And I do hit Masters in both draft and in ranked, and I do also upload draft videos as well. So yeah, give me a subscription if you want to see more content from me. As always, thank you guys for watching.